At my daughter's graduation party, my son-in-law picked up the scrapbook I'd spent 7 months making, flipped through about 4 pages, and handed it to his mother with a laugh. "Very grandma-core," he said. "We're going digital now. Nobody does paper anymore." His mother nodded and set it on the donation pile near the door like it was a Reader's Digest from 1987. I didn't say a word. I picked up my punch cup and I smiled, and I found a reason to be near the window for a while. That night, my daughter called me. Her voice was strange, tight around the edges, the way it gets when she's trying not to cry. "Mom," she said, "what was tucked inside the back cover of that book?" I sat down at the kitchen table. The scrapbook was in my bag, which I had quietly retrieved before I left the party, because I had learned a long time ago to trust my own hands more than other people's attention. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" I said. "Because Owen's mother just called me. She said she opened it when she got home. She said there was an envelope. Mom, she said there was an envelope and she wants to know if it was a mistake." It was not a mistake. Welcome to Brave Mom Stories. I'm Lillian Morrow. I'm 64 years old and I spent 31 years as a high school librarian in a small town in central Ohio, which means I have cataloged more love letters, more report cards, more handwritten dedications in the fronts of paperback novels than most people will see in a lifetime. I know what it means when someone takes care with a piece of paper. I know what it costs to put something in writing. And I know, better than almost anyone, that the most important things in a family are almost never the ones stored digitally. They're the ones folded and tucked and kept somewhere quiet, waiting for the right moment and the right hands. My husband Roy passed 2 years before that graduation party. 38 years of marriage, and then a February morning, and then a house that had too many chairs in it. Roy was a carpenter, not by trade but by nature. He built things. He built the porch. He built the bookshelves in every room. He built a bed frame for our daughter Megan when she was 7 because she wanted one with dolphins carved into the headboard, and he said, "Well, I suppose I can do that." He spent 3 weekends on it and never once complained. That was Roy. He thought nothing of pouring himself entirely into something if it was for someone he loved. What I did not know for most of our marriage was that Roy had been doing something similar with money, not in a flashy way. Roy didn't trust the stock market. He called it a casino for people in nicer shoes. What he trusted was property, small and patient. Over the years, quietly, without fanfare, he had saved. Not a fortune. Not the kind of money that changes your posture, but the careful, steady kind that accumulates when a man buys used instead of new and fixes things himself and never once cares what the neighbors drive. When Roy got his diagnosis, when we both knew, he asked me one afternoon to sit with him at the kitchen table with the green folder from the top of the filing cabinet. I had seen that folder for years. I assumed it was insurance documents or car titles or the kind of administrative nothing that keeps a household running. It held a savings account, a separate one, in both our names that Roy had been feeding quietly since before Megan started kindergarten, not every month, but regularly. When there was extra. When he finished a side job. When he got a bonus 1 year from the shop where he did contract work. When his own father left him a small inheritance that he could have spent on the truck he wanted, he put it in the green folder account instead. I won't make you wait for the number the way Megan had to. It was $41,000. Roy looked at me across the table with his particular expression. The one that meant he had thought about something for a long time and was finally ready to say, "That's Megan's," he said, "for when she's actually ready for it. Not now. Now she's 23, and she'll spend it on something that won't matter in 5 years. I want her to have it when she knows what to do with it. When she's got roots somewhere." He squeezed my hand. "Don't hand her an envelope, Lil. She'll cash it out before the ink dries. Put it somewhere she'll have to sit with it first. Make her earn the finding of it." That was Roy's whole philosophy of love. Make them earn the finding of it. He died 6 weeks later, and I spent the next year figuring out how to honor what he'd asked me to do. I should tell you about the scrapbook, because it took me longer than anything I have ever made. I started it 8 months after Roy passed, when Megan's graduation from her master's program was confirmed and I had a date to work toward. I am not a crafter by training. Roy was the one with the patient hands. But I am a librarian, and librarians know how to preserve things, how to sequence them, how to make a collection tell a story. So I sat at the dining room table every weekend with the photo bins Roy and I had kept since Megan was born, and I built her a book. 214 pages. I counted. I am a librarian. Every year of her life had a section. Birthday photos and report cards and the little notes her teachers wrote home about her. A photocopy of the dolphin drawing she'd done when she was 6 that Roy used as his blueprint for the bed frame. Letters I wrote her that I'd never sent, the kind you write at 2 in the morning when your child is far away and you just need to say you're proud of them somewhere, even if only to the paper. Roy's handwriting wherever I could find it. A grocery list, a note he'd left on the fridge, a birthday card from 3 years back. Little pieces of him pressed into the pages like wildflowers. On the inside of the back cover, behind a pocket I'd made from an old envelope of his, I tucked the account information and a letter. Not Roy's letter this time. Mine. Explaining everything. Explaining what he'd saved, and why, and what he hoped she'd do with it when she was ready. And at the very bottom of my letter, in Roy's words as close as I could remember them, make her earn the finding of it. I sealed the pocket with a strip of washi tape I'd been saving for something important. I wrapped the book in brown craft paper tied with kitchen twine, the way Roy used to wrap Christmas presents before Megan got old enough to have opinions about gift wrap. And I brought it to the graduation party at the venue her husband Owen had booked, which was a very clean, very beige event space in a suburb outside Columbus that looked like it had been assembled from a stock photo of the word celebration. I should tell you about Owen. Owen is not a bad person. I want to be fair. He works hard. He loves my daughter in his way. But Owen grew up in a family where success is something you can see, and what you can see is what matters. His parents have a large house that they discuss with some frequency. His mother, Renata, has a particular way of looking at things, scanning for brand names the way a metal detector sweeps for coins. When Megan and Owen got engaged, Renata told me at the rehearsal dinner that she'd been worried at first, because Megan's family was more of the homespun type, and she said it like she was complimenting a quilt she didn't want to touch. Owen had absorbed that way of looking at the world without ever quite deciding to. It was just the water he'd swum in, which is why, when he picked up my scrapbook and flipped through it with one hand while holding a drink with the other, it didn't occur to him that he was doing anything unkind. He was just reading the room. The room was full of people who lived online, and the scrapbook did not live online, and so it was, gently and efficiently, dismissed. Very grandma core, he said, and handed it to Renata, and went back to the conversation he'd been having. Renata looked at it for approximately 20 seconds, set it on the donation pile, patted it once, the way you'd pat a well-meaning stray you weren't going to take home. I was watching from across the room. I had been talking to Megan's friend Tess about something, I can't even remember what, and I turned and saw it happen in the way that slow motion works. Not literally slow, just clear, every detail arriving separately. My hands building that book on winter weekends. Roy's handwriting on the grocery list I'd found in his coat pocket. The pocket sewn behind the back cover. $41,000 and a dead man's instructions for his daughter's life, sitting on top of a stack of items headed for Goodwill. I said something polite to Tess and walked to the donation pile and picked up the scrapbook. I slid it into my tote bag. Nobody noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say anything. I found Megan across the room, glowing in her new dress, and I held her for a long moment and told her I was so proud of her. She smelled like the perfume she's worn since college, something with cedar in it. I told her I needed to head out early, that my back was bothering me, which was true enough. She walked me to the door, and I kissed her cheek, and I told her to enjoy every minute of it. I cried in the car, not from humiliation, though that was there too. From something older and quieter. I thought about Roy building the bookshelves. I thought about him at the kitchen table with the green folder. I thought about him saying, make her earn the finding of it. And I thought about how Renata had patted my Roy's legacy like a dog she wasn't keeping, and I had to sit very still until the feeling passed enough to drive. But here is the thing about grief that took me a long time to learn. It doesn't prevent clarity. Sometimes it makes things clearer. By the time I got home, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was not going to give Megan that money through Owen's hands. Not because I was angry, because I was paying attention. A household that responds to a handmade book with very grandma core and a donation pile is a household with a particular set of values, and those values are not the ones Roy saved 40 years to pass down. I knew my daughter. She would tell me I was overreacting. She would tell me Owen didn't mean it. She was probably right that he didn't mean it. But meaning and doing are two different things, and what he did was hand Roy's memory to his mother for the Goodwill pile without once looking at what he was holding. Roy had been specific. When she's got roots, when she knows what to do with it. I didn't think she was there yet. And I thought, not for the first time, that some of that was because the ground she was standing on had taught her that things you could see were the things that mattered. Roy's money was not going to teach her the same lesson. So I sat at the kitchen table with the green folder and a yellow legal pad, and I made some calls. The next morning, I called the bank first to understand my options. Then I called my friend Kathleen, who had gone through something similar with her late husband's estate and knew people who handled these things carefully. 2 weeks later, I had spoken to a trust attorney named Dennis, and we had set up what he called a restricted savings trust, Megan's name, her social security number, the $41,000, and change transferred in. The terms were Roy's, as close as I could make them legal. The money could not be withdrawn until she was 35, or used as a down payment on a primary residence verified to be in her name, or applied toward further education. It could not be co-signed out. It could not be borrowed against. It was hers, locked the way Roy intended. Patient. Growing slowly. It cost me something to lock it that tightly. Roy might have wanted her to be able to touch it sooner in an emergency. But Roy also hadn't watched Owen hand his green folder to Renata for the donation pile, and I had, and I made the decision I could live with. Then I made the other decision. I kept the scrapbook. I was going to give it to Megan properly, the way Roy would have wanted, with everyone in the room. The phone call came before I had a chance to arrange that. Renata called Megan 2 days after the party. She'd opened the scrapbook, she said, looking for something to donate to the church craft fair, something she could pull a few pages from for a collage project. And she'd found the pocket in the back, the sealed pocket, the envelope inside. She hadn't opened it, but the envelope said Megan's name on it in my handwriting, and Renata, to her credit, had stopped. She called Megan. Megan called me. Mom! My daughter's voice had a sound I hadn't heard since she was 15 and had broken something she knew mattered. A careful, held breath sound. Mom! What was in that book? Where are you right now? I asked. In the car. Owen's inside. Tell me. Your father left you something, I said. He's been saving it since before you started kindergarten. It's been in a separate account all these years. I hid the information in the back of the scrapbook the way he asked me to, so you'd find it properly. Silence. How much? She said, and her voice had shifted into something quieter. I told her. I told her the number, and I told her the terms Roy had used when he described it to me, and I told her what he'd said, word for word, as close as I remembered. When she's got roots, make her earn the finding of it. The line went very quiet. Oh, Mama, she said. She hadn't called me Mama since she was small. Oh, Mama, Owen put it on the donate pile. I know, I said. I took it home. You have it? I have it. Everything's safe. Nothing was lost. I heard her exhale a long shaking sound, and then she made a sound that was not quite crying and not quite laughing, and was entirely her father's daughter. Why didn't you just tell me? At the party? Why didn't you just say something? Because your father asked me not to, I said. He wanted you to find it. He wanted it to mean something more than a check in an envelope. He said you'd cash a check before the ink dried. I paused. He knew you pretty well. She laughed. It was wet at the edges. Yeah, she said. He did. I should tell you what those next hours were like for Megan, because you should see it from where she was standing. She sat in the car in the driveway. She told me later, and thought about the party. About Owen picking up the book with one hand. About his laugh. about Renata's pat, about herself, across the room in her graduation dress, not noticing, not watching, not saying anything. She had not been watching the donation pile. She had trusted that the people at her party would treat her mother's gift with basic decency, and she hadn't checked, and her father's money had almost gone to a church craft fair collage project. She sat there for a long time. Then she went inside and told Owen. I wasn't there for that conversation. I heard it from both of them eventually, and the two versions tell you, as they always do, exactly who is telling them. Owen's version. He felt terrible. He genuinely hadn't known. He said he would have never if he'd known he would never have. He kept coming back to the not knowing the way people do when they're looking for the exit that lets them off the hook. He wasn't wrong that he didn't know. But the not knowing came from not looking, and the not looking came from having already decided what the thing was worth before he touched it. Renata's version, which I heard secondhand through Megan and which she delivered to her son before she delivered it to me. How were we supposed to know what was in it? Nobody labels these things. You can't expect people to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. She added that she thought it was a little unusual to hide financial information in a craft project and that maybe there could have been more communication. It was, I thought when I heard it, a remarkable performance of being the injured party after nearly donating someone's inheritance to a collage. Owen came to me on his own, about a week later. I'll give him that. He drove to my house, sat at my kitchen table, and he apologized. He looked at the scrapbook, which I'd set out because I'd known he was coming, and he went quiet looking at it for a while. I didn't even open it properly, he said. I flipped through the first few pages and He stopped. I didn't look. No, I said. You didn't. I'm sorry, Lillian. I believed him. I also believed it would take him more than one sorry to understand why it mattered. But it was a start. Your wife's father put 38 years into this family, I said, quietly, without asking for anything back. The scrapbook is one afternoon of him. It's also one afternoon of me, every weekend for 7 months, with hands that are not getting younger. I looked at him steadily. What you handed to your mother cost 2 people most of what they had to give. He didn't argue. He nodded slowly, like a man calculating a debt he's going to have to pay for a long time. What do you want from me? He asked. I want one thing, I told him. I want to give Megan her father's gift properly, in front of family. Sitting down, the way Roy asked. He nodded again. I planned a Sunday dinner. My house, because I have the home court advantage of a kitchen that has fed this family for 30 years, and because Roy built the table we'd be sitting at, and that mattered to me. I invited Megan and Owen, my sister-in-law Carla, who had loved Roy like a brother, and my own sister June, who was the person who had sat with me the night Roy died and hadn't said a word, just held my hand until morning. I considered whether to invite Renata. I decided yes. The people who'd been in the room for the first version deserved to be in the room for the real one. I cooked Roy's favorites, pot roast and mashed potatoes and the green bean dish he used to request every birthday. I made his mother's cornbread because there is no good reason to let a recipe die with the person. We ate first. I am a firm believer that you don't do hard things on an empty stomach, and I wanted everyone warm and settled and unable to claim they'd been ambushed. We talked about Megan's new job, which started in 3 weeks. We talked about Carla's garden and June's granddaughter, who had just said her first complete sentence. It was almost pleasant. Owen was quieter than usual. Renata, to her credit, brought a fruit pie and did not mention what it cost. Then I cleared the plates and came back to the table and set the scrapbook in front of me. I'd like to give Megan her father's gift now, I said, the way he asked me to. The table went still. Megan's hand found Owen's on the tablecloth. Renata looked at the scrapbook and then at her plate. Roy asked me the last coherent week we had together to make sure this found her properly. I set my hand flat on the brown craft paper cover. He didn't want an envelope. He said she'd spend an envelope before the ink dried. A small sound from Megan. He wanted her to find it inside something that would last. Something that told her who she came from before it told her what she'd been left. I opened the back cover and reached into the pocket and drew out the envelope. This is a letter from me, I said, setting it on the table in front of Megan. "It explains everything your father saved, and why, and what he hoped you'd use it for." And at the bottom, in his words as close as I could write them, is what he said to me at the kitchen table when he showed me the account. I smoothed the envelope. "Your father saved $41,000, Megan, a little at a time. From before you started kindergarten, from every bonus and every side job, and the inheritance from his own father that he could have put toward the truck he'd wanted for 15 years. I looked at my daughter. It's yours. It's locked in a restricted trust in your name only, terms he'd have approved of, and it will be there when you're ready for it in the way he meant." The number moved around the table like a current. June's eyes filled immediately. Carla pressed her hand over her mouth. Renata had gone very still. Owen looked at the scrapbook. He looked at it for a long time. "And then," I said, "there is one more thing." I reached into the pocket a second time and drew out a folded piece of yellow legal paper. My handwriting, but Roy's words. "He dictated this to me the afternoon he showed me the account," I said. "He made me read it back to him twice to make sure I'd gotten it right. He said to read it out loud, to whoever was in the room when Megan found the book. He didn't know what room that would be. But here we are." My hands were shaking a little, not from nerves, from the particular weight of holding something that is both ordinary paper and the last clear wishes of someone you loved for 4 decades. I unfolded it and I read, "Meggie." He'd started, because that was his name for her from the beginning. If your mother is reading this out loud in a room full of people, she's done it right. And you should know she always does everything right, even when I'm not there to see it. I've been putting money away since you were little. Not because I didn't trust you with it, because I wanted you to have it when it meant something. When you've built something worth, the money is for whatever gets you there. The house, the school, whatever it takes to root yourself somewhere. Roots matter more than people tell you. Your grandfather gave me a piece of land once, not money, a piece of land, and it made me understand something I've tried to pass on to you without always knowing how to say it. A thing you have to tend is worth more than a thing you can spend. So tend something. Whatever this money helps you build, tend it. Take care of it. Take care of your mother. She'll say she doesn't need it. She does, a little. Let her think she doesn't. All my love always, your dad. The room was quiet in the particular way of rooms where everyone is trying not to fall apart at the same time. June was crying openly. Carla had her head bent. Megan had her face pressed into Owen's shoulder, and Owen, to his credit, had his arm around her and was looking at the yellow paper like a man who has just understood something that cannot be ununderstood. I folded it back into its crease and set it down gently. "He left that for this room," I said, "for whoever was here when the book was finally opened." I looked at Megan. "He loved you so specifically, sweetheart. Not in a general way. In the way of a man who noticed you, who kept the dolphin drawing, who built you things." My voice held. "Barely. The money is for your life. The book is for your memory. And the finding of it was supposed to teach you something about what lasts. I'm sorry the first finding didn't go the way he planned." Megan lifted her head. Her face was a complicated thing. "I should have watched," she said. "I should have been watching where it went." "You were celebrating," I said. "That's allowed." She looked at her husband. Owen looked at her, and then he looked at me and he said quietly, "I'm sorry, Lillian. I know that's not enough, but I am." Renata cleared her throat. She looked at the scrapbook. She seemed to be working through something. "I didn't open the envelope," she said finally. "When I found it, I called Megan first. I just want that on record." "I know," I said. "That was the right thing to do." She nodded, once tightly. It was not quite an apology. But it was something she chose to offer, and I counted it. I looked around my kitchen table, at Roy's chairs, at the people he had loved, and the people who were learning to understand what that meant. "I want to say one more thing," I said, "and then we'll have dessert, and nobody has to be sad anymore tonight." They waited. Roy was a quiet man who did large things without announcing them. He built this table. He saved 40 years of small amounts for a daughter who was already grown by the time he showed me the account. He did not need to be thanked. He did not need to be seen. He just needed the thing to last. I put my hand flat on the table. Roy's table. That's what I'm asking from all of you. Not grand gestures, not speeches, just the same thing he gave, which is paying attention to the things that don't come with a price tag, because those are always the ones that matter when it counts. Owen nodded slowly. Megan was watching me with Roy's exact expression, the one that meant she was filing something away to think about for a long time. Renata said, after a moment, "That was a beautiful table to build." I looked at her. I let it be enough. Here is what happened after, because I know you want the ledger and not just the feeling. The trust is doing what trusts do, sitting quietly, growing patiently. Megan is 31 now, and she is 4 years away from the first eligible withdrawal date. She calls me sometimes and asks questions about it, not to get at it early, just to understand. She asks about the interest, about what Roy would think of this or that decision. She is, I think, becoming the person he saved it for. Slowly, the way things grow that actually last. Owen is different than he was, not transformed, I won't overstate it, but changed in the particular way that comes from being present when something real happens. He took a week that following month and drove to the small town in Indiana where Roy had grown up and walked around the streets. His grandfather had walked and came home quieter. He didn't explain it. He brought me a photograph of the house where Roy was born, which he'd found on a historical property site. I have it on the refrigerator. He doesn't know I cry a little. Every time I see it, I'm going to let him not know. Renata and I are not close. We won't be. But she asked me, 2 months after that dinner, if I still had Roy's cornbread recipe, and whether I'd be willing to share it. I said yes. She made it for Thanksgiving. She did not mention what the ingredients cost. That is, for Renata, a significant concession, and I received it as such. The scrapbook lives at Megan's house now, on the shelf in the front room where people can see it when they come in. She added pages to it after Roy's death, printed photos and tucked in notes, made it a thing that continues rather than ends. She showed me last Christmas. The dolphin drawing is still there, her father's blueprint for a 7-year-old's bed, in a plastic sleeve near the front. She'd put a sticky note next to it in her handwriting. It said, "He noticed. My hands are slower than they used to be. I've started a new book for when Megan has a child, if she does, though I'm not asking. I've got Roy's grocery lists, pressed and ready. I've saved the note he left on the fridge the morning he died, which just said going for coffee back soon, and someday there will be a child who needs to know their grandfather was the kind of man who left notes that said back soon, right up to the end. I will sew the back cover pocket. I will seal it with something that takes intention to open. I will make them earn the finding of it." That's what we do when we love people the Roy way. Quietly, specifically, with our whole selves tucked inside something ordinary. Easy to miss if you're not looking, worth everything if you are. Learn how to look, and if you're holding something someone made for you with the last of what they had, please look before you let it go.